She was officially declared dead. The Air Force buried her. 5 years passed. Her call sign Ghost was sealed away forever. No pilot was ever allowed to use it again. But when a plane full of 287 people started falling from the sky, 2 F-22 pilots heard that call sign Ghost on their radio. And they completely froze. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Captain Sarah Martinez was officially dead. Her name was carved into a black granite wall at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, right next to names of other pilots who never came home. The small gold star beside her name meant she had died in active service, on a mission so secret that even the people who loved her most were never told the truth about what really happened. Her flight helmet sat in a glass box in the squadron ready room. Her call sign Ghost was officially retired forever. No pilot would ever use that name again. The United States Air Force had made that promise 5 years ago, standing over an empty casket draped with the American flag. But when United Airlines Flight 4471 began falling apart at 38,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, with 287 passengers and no working autopilot and a captain who could no longer see straight, a quiet woman in seat 31A put down her water bottle and looked out the window at the dark ocean far below. She listened to the engines. She felt the way the plane moved. And she knew exactly what was happening, because she had spent 5 years in situations far worse than this. Captain Sarah Martinez was not dead. She had never been dead. And in the next 40 minutes, every person on that aircraft would find out why the Air Force had once called her the most dangerous pilot alive. Before we tell you the full story, comment below from which country you are watching this. And do not forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. It was September 8, 2025, and Sarah Martinez had been officially dead for 5 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Back at Nellis Air Force Base, her old squadron, the famous 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron, was finishing their morning briefing when one young pilot, as he did every single morning, reached out and touched the glass box containing Sarah's flight helmet for good luck. The helmet was black with a single white ghost painted on the side, 2 dark eyes and a faint smile, the symbol she had chosen herself when she was 26 years old and first earned her call sign by being so difficult to track on radar that her own instructors could not find her during training exercises. Her father, retired Master Sergeant Diego Martinez, kept her official portrait on the wall of his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In the photograph, Sarah stood beside an F-22 Raptor with her helmet under her arm and a smile that her father always said looked like she was keeping a secret. Her younger brother Marco had joined the Air Force after her death, inspired by the sister he had lost. Her mother Rosa still left a candle burning in the kitchen window every night, the way her own mother had taught her, a light to guide lost souls home. The aviation world knew Captain Sarah Martinez by reputation even after her death. She had graduated top of her class at the United States Air Force Academy. She had earned her F-22 qualification with the highest scores recorded in a decade. Before her disappearance, she had flown over 1,400 hours in the F-22 Raptor, completed 2 combat tours, spoken 4 languages fluently, and finished SEER survival school with perfect scores. Her instructors used to say she did not just fly aircraft, she became them. She felt every movement through her hands and feet the way a surgeon feels tissue. She could read an emergency faster than any computer could diagnose it. Her call sign Ghost had been officially retired the same week as her memorial service. The Air Force commander who spoke at the ceremony called it a permanent honor. Call sign Ghost would belong to Captain Sarah Martinez and nobody else, forever. But Sarah was not dead. At this exact moment on September 8, 2025, she sat in seat 31A aboard United Airlines Flight 4471, traveling from Tokyo to Los Angeles across the North Pacific Ocean. She wore a plain white shirt, dark gray travel pants, and running shoes designed for moving fast in emergency situations. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Beside her, the middle seat was empty. In the window seat to her right, an elderly Japanese man slept under a thin blue blanket. None of the 287 other passengers on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner looked at her twice. She looked like a tired traveler coming home from a business trip. Nothing about her suggested that she had spent the last 5 years doing things the United States government would not officially confirm for another 20 years. 5 years earlier, Captain Sarah Martinez had been selected for Operation Dark Passage because she was simply the best available. The mission profile was brutally simple in concept and terrifyingly complex in execution. Fly a specially modified F-22 through Chinese and North Korean air defense networks, photograph 3 underground military facilities that satellite imagery could not penetrate, and return without triggering a diplomatic catastrophe. She had trained for this specific mission for 8 months. She knew the route better than she knew the streets of her hometown. She was ready. The mission fell apart in the first 12 minutes over North Korean territory. A new type of radar system, one that American intelligence had not known existed, painted her F-22 in full detail despite its stealth coating. Her aircraft began taking electronic attacks that disrupted her navigation systems, her communications, and her engine management software simultaneously. Sarah had exactly 4 options. She could eject and face capture in one of the most hostile nations on Earth. She could attempt to fight through to the target and accept a 90% chance of being shot down before she arrived. She could turn back and accept mission failure with all the consequences that came with it. Or she could find the option that no mission planner had written into any manual. She chose the impossible option, as she always did. Sarah pushed her damaged F-22 to its absolute limits, flying below radar coverage at altitudes and speeds that human beings were not supposed to survive. She found gaps in the North Korean air defense network that did not officially exist. She reached all 3 target facilities, photographed what needed to be photographed, and then flew her dying aircraft toward the sea. She crash-landed on a remote stretch of coast at the China-North Korea border, a stretch of rocky beach that no satellite was watching at that moment because Sarah had studied the satellite schedules for weeks before the mission. She could have triggered the emergency beacon. She could have waited for rescue. Instead, Sarah made a decision that her commanders would only understand much later. She had landed directly in the middle of one of the most active intelligence corridors in Asia. The things she could learn by disappearing into the underground networks operating across that border region, were worth more than any single photography mission. She disabled her aircraft's transponder, triggered the self-destruct system on the F-22 in a way that would look like a catastrophic engine failure, and walked away from the burning wreckage with nothing but her survival training, her 4 languages, and the absolute certainty that she was making the right call. For 5 years, Captain Sarah Martinez lived as a ghost. She moved through China, North Korea, Russia, and Japan using a series of cover identities built from her language skills and her ability to become whoever a situation required her to be. She gathered intelligence on nuclear weapons programs, weapons technology transfers, cybersecurity operations targeting American infrastructure, and communication networks between hostile governments. She sent information through deep cover channels using methods so secure that even her handlers in Washington sometimes went 3 months without hearing from her. She stopped 4 major cyber attacks on American power grid systems. She identified 2 North Korean agents who had penetrated American defense contractors. She photographed a weapons facility that changed American military planning in the entire Pacific Theater. The woman who had entered that intelligence operation 5 years ago had been extraordinary. The woman sitting in seat 31A of United Airlines Flight 4471 was something beyond extraordinary. She was a person who had survived things that most human beings could not imagine, and who had come out the other side sharper, faster, and more capable than when she went in. Captain David Reyes had been flying commercial aircraft for United Airlines for 19 years. The 51-year-old pilot from San Diego had accumulated over 18,000 flight hours across every major aircraft type in the commercial fleet. He had a perfect safety record, a calm reputation, and the kind of easy confidence that came from nearly 2 decades of professional aviation. But at 2:17 in the morning Pacific time, approximately 1,100 miles northeast of Hawaii over the North Pacific Ocean, Captain Reyes began experiencing something that his 19 years had not prepared him for. It started as a subtle vibration in the flight controls, barely detectable but enough to make an experienced pilot pay attention. Then the vibration became a shudder. Then the first warning light appeared on the instrument panel. Then the second. Then, within 90 seconds, warning lights and alarm tones were competing for space on a flight deck that was suddenly too full of problems. First Officer Amanda Chen, 31 years old with 4,200 flight hours, was already working through emergency checklists when Captain Reyes felt the first crushing pressure in his chest. He had felt something similar once before, years ago, a pulled muscle during a gym workout. This felt nothing like that. This felt like a fist closing slowly around his heart. "Amanda," he said, and his voice came out wrong, smaller than it should have been. "I need you to take the controls." First Officer Chen looked at her captain and felt her stomach drop. His face had gone the color of old concrete. "Sir, are you?" "Take the controls now," he said. "I'm not okay." Amanda Chen took the controls of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner that was simultaneously experiencing hydraulic pressure irregularities, a partial electrical failure affecting 3 of its 6 primary displays, and autopilot behavior that was becoming increasingly unreliable, while her captain was folding forward in his seat with one hand pressed to his chest. "San Francisco Center, United 4471, she transmitted, and even in her own ears she could hear the effort it was taking to keep her voice level. Declaring emergency. Captain incapacitated, possible cardiac event. Aircraft experiencing multiple system warnings. Position approximately 1,100 miles northeast of Hawaii, altitude 38,000 feet. I am sole pilot in command. Please advise." The response from air traffic control came within seconds, professional and immediate. United 4471, San Francisco Center copies your emergency. You are radar contact. Nearest suitable airport is Honolulu International at approximately 1,050 miles from your position. Can you maintain altitude and heading? Before Amanda could answer, the Boeing 787 made a decision of its own. The autopilot, struggling with the partial electrical failure, disconnected with a series of warning tones that sounded through the flight deck like a mechanical scream. The aircraft, now without autopilot and flown by a single pilot who had never in her career faced anything approaching this combination of failures, began a gradual but accelerating descent. In the passenger cabin, 287 people continued their night flight across the Pacific. Most were sleeping. Some were watching movies. A couple near the back were having a quiet argument about vacation plans. Not one of them knew that the aircraft they were sitting in was slowly becoming unflyable, that their captain might be dying, and that their first officer was alone in the cockpit, doing everything a human being could do and possibly still not enough. Sarah had been awake for an hour when it happened. She did not sleep well on aircraft anymore. Too many years of being the person who had to stay awake while everyone else slept had rewired her brain in ways she was still learning to live with. She had been reading when the aircraft's movement changed in a way that she felt before she consciously understood it. She put her book down. She listened. The engine note was slightly wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not wrong enough that a normal passenger would notice. But Sarah had 1,400 hours in aircraft that vibrated and screamed and warned of imminent death, and the sound she was hearing right now was a sound that meant the people flying this aircraft were in serious trouble. She looked out the window. Black ocean as far as she could see in every direction. Absolute darkness below. No land. No lights. Nothing but cold water that would kill everyone aboard within minutes of impact. Then the passenger announcement came. Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Chen. We are currently experiencing some technical difficulties with aircraft systems. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and remain in your seats. We will update you as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. A professional announcement. Calm. Controlled. But Sarah heard what the other 287 passengers did not hear. She heard the fraction of a second pause before First Officer Chen began speaking. She heard the way Chen's breath was slightly too fast, the way a person breathes when they are managing panic rather than feeling calm. She heard the absence of any mention of the captain. She had spent 5 years listening for exactly the kinds of truths that people tried to hide inside professional language, and what she heard in those 32 words was a first officer who was alone and terrified and needed help immediately. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The nearest flight attendant, a tall young man named James, moved toward her immediately. "Ma'am, the seatbelt sign is on. I need you to." "I am a pilot," Sarah said quietly, keeping her voice low enough that the passengers around her would not hear. "Military trained, multi-engine qualified, over 1,400 hours in high-performance aircraft. Your first officer is alone up there and this aircraft is in serious trouble. I can help her. You need to take me to the cockpit right now." James looked at her for a moment. He had been a flight attendant for 6 years. He had dealt with many passengers claiming authority they did not have. But there was something in this woman's eyes, a specific quality of absolute calm in the middle of crisis, that was not something most people could fake. "I need to call forward," he said. "Do it fast," Sarah replied. James used the interphone. "Amanda, I have a passenger, female, claims to be a military pilot with over 1,400 hours. She says she can help. Captain is still unconscious." A pause. Then Amanda's voice came back, and even through the interphone the exhaustion and fear in it was unmistakable. "Is she credible?" Sarah spoke directly at the handset without being invited. "First Officer Chen, I have F-22 Raptor qualification, multi-engine commercial equivalency, and emergency systems training. You have a dying aircraft and a medical emergency, and you have been alone for approximately 8 minutes. Tell me what you need me to do and I will do it. We can figure out the paperwork when we land." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Bring her forward." The cockpit was controlled chaos. Captain Reyes was unconscious in the left seat, his breathing shallow and irregular. First Officer Chen sat in the right seat with both hands on the controls and eyes that were scanning the instrument panel with the focused desperation of someone solving a math problem while the house burned down around them. 3 of the primary displays showed the flickering quality of partial electrical failure. The aircraft's descent rate had increased to 400 feet per minute. Sarah took one look at the cockpit and moved to the jump seat with the economy of someone who had spent years entering dangerous situations and immediately calculating exactly what needed to happen. "Talk to me," she said to Amanda. "Full picture, fastest version." Amanda gave it to her in 30 seconds, professional and precise despite everything. "Captain, cardiac event approximately 12 minutes ago. Aircraft experiencing partial electrical failure, cause unknown, affecting autopilot and 3 primary displays. Hydraulic pressure is nominal but the autopilot disconnected and I cannot get it to stay connected. We are 1,050 miles from Honolulu. Fuel is adequate. I have been trying to stabilize descent and losing." Sarah was already reading the instruments as Amanda spoke. She was looking at patterns, the way she had spent 5 years looking at situations that had too many variables and finding the single thread that made sense of all of them. She saw it within 40 seconds. "This is not a random failure," she said, and her voice carried a quality that made Amanda glance sideways. It had been years since Amanda had heard another pilot sound that specific kind of calm. "The electrical failure has a pattern. Your backup bus is carrying everything it should not be carrying because your primary distribution seems to have lost a connection somewhere. You still have control authority but your systems are fighting each other. We need to manually offload from the backup bus." Amanda stared. "How do you know that?" "Because I have landed aircraft with less than this," Sarah replied. "May I?" She gestured toward the captain's seat. Amanda nodded without hesitation. Sarah moved Captain Reyes carefully, checking his pulse and breathing before repositioning him. She keyed the passenger announcement. If there is a physician or a nurse on board, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately. Then she turned to the flight deck systems with her complete attention. San Francisco Center, United 4471, a new voice on the radio, she transmitted. Assisting pilot now aboard, military qualified. Requesting immediate vectors to Honolulu and any available military emergency support in the area. What assets do you have? The controller's response carried the particular quality of someone very professional doing a very difficult job very well. United 4471, copying you assisting pilot aboard. We are coordinating with Pacific Air Forces Command. You have 2 F-22 Raptors from the 199th Fighter Squadron at Hickam Air Force Base, currently airborne on training exercise. They are 340 miles from your position and can reach you in approximately 18 minutes. Do you want them? Sarah's hands tightened briefly on the controls. F-22 Raptors. Her aircraft. The jet she had flown for years before she disappeared, the aircraft whose entire personality she knew the way she knew her own reflection. Request them, she said. And tell them we will need communication relay support and a weather report for Honolulu approach. Understood, United 4471. Raptors are being vectored to your position now. What is your current situation? Situation is manageable, Sarah said, and she said it in the tone of someone who had assessed the situation and genuinely meant it. We have one unconscious pilot receiving medical attention, multiple system warnings indicating partial electrical bus failure, autopilot offline, and approximately 1,020 miles to Honolulu. We need to arrest our descent and manually configure electrical systems. I am working on it now. She began working through the electrical system configuration with methodical speed. Her hands moved across switches and controls with the muscle memory of someone who had spent years in cockpits where mistakes were measured in lives rather than performance reviews. Amanda Chen, watching her, felt the first loosening of the knot in her chest that had been tightening for the last 14 minutes. Who are you? Amanda asked quietly, in the way people ask questions when they already know the answer is going to be extraordinary. Someone who can help, Sarah replied without looking up from the panels. What is the doctor situation? A flight attendant reported through the interphone that Dr. Patricia Okafor, an emergency medicine physician from Seattle, was already forward and assessing Captain Reyes. 2 minutes later, Dr. Okafor's voice came through. He is alive. Cardiac event, serious but not immediately fatal. He needs a hospital and surgery, but I can keep him stable for 1 hour. Maybe 90 minutes with what I have available. Can we get down in that time? Working on it, Sarah said. She had already started the managed electrical offload, carefully redistributing load between the aircraft's bus systems in a sequence that the aircraft's automatic systems could not perform in their current degraded state. She did it manually, system by system, with the patience and precision of someone defusing a bomb. Within 6 minutes, 2 of the 3 flickering displays stabilized. Within 8 minutes, the descent rate began to decrease. The aircraft was answering her, the way aircraft always answered her, because Sarah Martinez did not fly aircraft so much as she had conversations with them, and she was very good at finding out exactly what they needed. 18 minutes after being scrambled, the radio crackled with a new voice. United 4471, this is Raptor Flight. 2 F-22s from Hickam, we have you on radar, 60 miles out. We are here to support. Who am I talking to? Major Kevin Cole was 36 years old with 2,800 hours in the F-22 Raptor. He had flown combat missions over 3 different theaters and trained alongside some of the most decorated aviators in Air Force history. He was a man who was not easily surprised by things that happened in the air. But flying escort for a crippled civilian airliner in the middle of the North Pacific at 2 in the morning was not a situation he had expected his training exercise to become. Beside him, 3 miles off his left wing, Captain Diana Torres flew as his wingman in the second F-22. She was 30 years old, 2 years out of F-22 qualification, and considered by her peers to be one of the most naturally gifted pilots in the 199th. She had her eyes on the big slow shape of the Boeing 787, visible now on her radar as a large and very vulnerable target. Raptor Flight, United 4471, the voice from the crippled airliner came back. Good to have you with us. Situation as follows. One pilot incapacitated with cardiac event receiving emergency medical attention, partial electrical failure now partially controlled, autopilot offline, manual flight control stable. We are heading for Honolulu, approximately 940 miles, current speed 380 knots. We need weather at destination and communication relay support. Can you assist? The voice was calm. Competent. Completely, utterly calm in the way that only a very small number of people can be calm when they are flying a crippled aircraft over 940 miles of dark ocean with a dying captain and 287 lives behind them. Major Cole found himself thinking about that voice for a moment before he answered. Copy, United 4471. Raptor Flight will provide weather relay and communication support. We have visual on your aircraft now. Positioning for escort. Can I get the name of the assisting pilot? In the cockpit of the 787, Sarah heard the question and understood its purpose immediately. The F-22 pilots needed to verify she was real. They needed to know she was not a hijacker, not an imposter, not someone pretending to have qualifications she did not possess. She had two choices. She could give a cover name, one of the dozen identities she had used and discarded over 5 years in hostile territory. Or she could tell the truth, and watch everything change in the span of a single sentence. She was tired of cover names. She had been tired of them for a very long time. Raptor Flight, she said. Assisting pilot is Captain Sarah Martinez. Formerly United States Air Force, 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron, Nellis Air Force Base. F-22 Raptor qualified, approximately 1,400 hours in type. Last active duty 5 years ago. She stopped transmitting. She waited. What happened next lasted exactly 4 seconds. In aviation radio communication, 4 seconds is not a pause. It is not a delay. 4 seconds of total silence on an emergency frequency, with a crippled airliner and 287 lives in the balance, is something that does not happen. Professional pilots do not go silent for 4 seconds. They are trained against it from their very first day. 4 seconds of silence on a military emergency channel means something has gone so wrong with the person on the other end that their training has temporarily stopped working. Major Kevin Cole's hands had stopped moving. He had not told them to stop. They had stopped on their own. His fingers were still on the throttle and stick of his F-22 Raptor, but they were not doing anything, because the part of his brain that operated his hands had received a signal from a deeper part of his brain, a primal part, a part that dealt with things that could not be processed through normal channels, and that signal said, "Stop everything, because what you just heard is impossible." Sarah Martinez. Captain Sarah Martinez. Cole knew that name the way he knew his own name. He had been a junior pilot at Nellis Air Force Base 5 years ago when Captain Sarah Martinez, call sign Ghost, had flown out on a classified mission and never come back. He had been in the hangar. When the call came through that she was listed as missing, he had watched her commanding officer's face go from professional concern to something harder and grayer when missing became killed in action. He had stood in his dress blues at the memorial ceremony 7 weeks later and saluted an empty casket draped with the American flag while her mother made a sound that he still heard sometimes at 3 in the morning when he could not sleep. He had touched her helmet in its glass case every single morning for 2 years before his transfer orders moved him to Hickam. He had read her name on the memorial plaque so many times he could trace the letters from memory. Captain Sarah Martinez. Call sign Ghost. Killed in action. The ultimate sacrifice. She had been dead for 5 years. Havoc. His wingman's voice came through the interphone channel. Diana Torres sounded like someone trying to hold a very large, very heavy, very impossible thing with both hands and not quite managing it. Havoc. Did she just say Sarah Martinez? Like, 422nd Nellis Sarah Martinez? Cole could not answer for a moment. He was looking at the Boeing 787 ahead of him, the big crippled aircraft moving through the dark sky over the Pacific with the particular wounded quality of a machine fighting against its own failures, and he was thinking about the woman inside it, the woman who had just given him a name and a unit and a qualification record that matched exactly, perfectly, completely the record of a pilot who had been dead for 5 years. Havoc. Torres again, and her voice was sharper now, trying to cut through the impossible. Talk to me. I hear you, Cole said. His voice came out steady. 20 years of flight training kept it steady even when nothing else was. Stand by. He keyed his radio and transmitted to the Boeing 787. United 4471, this is Raptor flight. Requesting full identity confirmation. State your military service number, your F-22 qualification number, your former commanding officer, and one classified item from your mission briefing record. Do this now. In the cockpit of the 787, Sarah understood exactly what was happening and why. She gave Cole everything he asked for. Her service number. Her qualification number. Colonel James Whitfield, her former commanding officer at the 422nd, retired now and living in Arizona. And one item from the briefing for Operation Dark Passage, a technical detail about the modified F-22's radar suppression system that existed in exactly 3 classified documents in the world and had never been made public. She transmitted it all in 30 seconds, calm and complete. Then she waited again. The silence this time was shorter. 8 seconds instead of 4. But those 8 seconds felt like something that had weight and temperature, something cold pressing against the windows of the cockpit while the dark Pacific stretched away below them in every direction for 1,000 miles. Then Major Cole's voice came back. It was the voice of a man who had been trained for 20 years to sound professional in situations that were not professional. It was the voice of a man who was currently using every bit of that 20 years of training to hold something enormous and impossible inside his chest and keep it from coming out of his mouth in a way that would not serve the situation. He was almost succeeding. Not quite. But almost. United 4471, Raptor flight copies your identification. All elements confirmed. We are cross-referencing classification records now. Please continue advising your situation and your needs. He had not said her call sign. Not yet. Sarah understood why. She understood it in the way she understood most things, by having already been through worse versions of the same situation, by having learned to read what people could not bring themselves to say. He needed to hear the call sign from her. He needed her to say it first. He needed to know that the woman flying that 787 over the dark Pacific knew exactly who she was and was choosing to say so, not being tricked into revealing it, not making a mistake, not being forced. He needed it to be a choice. Sarah Martinez had been making choices like this for 5 years. Hard choices. Impossible choices. Choices that cost things she would never fully get back. This one, compared to most of them, was easy. Raptor flight, she said, and she felt the weight of the next words move through her the way a deep breath moves through a body that has been holding itself very still for a very long time. I know what you need to hear. I know what you are waiting for. My call sign is Ghost. Call sign Ghost, officially retired 5 years ago by the United States Air Force following my declared death during Operation Dark Passage. I know my official status. I have known my official status every single day for 5 years. But right now I have 287 people behind me who need to land safely in Honolulu and I need fellow aviators beside me, not a debate about whether I am supposed to be alive or dead. So I am asking you directly, pilot to pilot. Can you fly with me? The silence after those words lasted 3 seconds. Then something happened on the radio that air traffic controllers at 3 different facilities would later describe in their incident reports, something they noted as highly irregular and deeply unprofessional by standard aviation communication protocols, and that every single one of them said they completely understood. In his F-22 Raptor cockpit, Major Kevin Cole, call sign Havoc, who had stood at a memorial service 5 years ago and saluted an empty casket and touched a dead friend's helmet every morning for 2 years after that, closed his eyes behind his visor for exactly 1 second. 1 second. Then he opened them and keyed his radio. "Copy that, Ghost," he said, and he said the call sign the way you say the name of someone you thought was lost to you forever, the way you say it when you have been carrying the absence of it for 5 years without knowing that is what you were carrying, the way you say it when the person it belongs to is right there in front of you asking if you will fly beside them. He said it with everything in it, all 5 years of it, and then he put the weight of it down and became a pilot again, because that was what the situation needed and that was what Sarah Martinez needed and that was what 287 people who had no idea any of this was happening needed. Raptor flight is on your wing. Tell us what you need. We are going to bring everyone home. In the second F-22, Captain Diana Torres, call sign Viper, had not said a word for 90 seconds. She was 28 years old and had never attended a memorial service for a fellow pilot. She had never touched a dead friend's helmet for good luck. She did not know Sarah Martinez except as a name on a plaque and a ghost painted on a black helmet in a glass case. But she had just watched her flight lead, one of the most unshakable pilots she had ever known, go silent for 4 seconds in the middle of an emergency escort mission. She had just heard the call sign Ghost spoken on a military emergency frequency by a pilot who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. And she had just heard Havoc say copy that, Ghost in a voice that sounded like it had been carrying something impossibly heavy and had just, for the first time in years, been allowed to put it down. Torres blinked. She straightened in her seat. She checked her instruments, checked the Boeing 787 ahead, checked her fuel and her position and her heading. She did all the things a professional pilot does when the world has just tilted sideways and needs to be tilted back. Then she keyed her interphone. "Havoc," she said quietly. "Is she real?" Cole looked at the 787 ahead. He watched the way it moved through the sky. He watched the control inputs, the tiny constant adjustments, the way the aircraft was being managed with a delicacy and precision that he had seen from exactly one other pilot in his entire career, years ago, over the Nevada desert, in an F-22 Raptor that moved like it was thinking. "Yeah," he said. "She is real. Nobody else flies like that. Nobody in the world flies like Ghost." The next 70 minutes were the longest of Amanda Chen's aviation career, and she had been flying for 12 years. She watched Sarah Martinez fly the crippled Boeing 787 through 940 miles of dark ocean and she understood for the first time in her life what it actually meant when someone described another person as a natural. Sarah did not fly the aircraft the way pilots were trained to fly aircraft. She flew it the way a musician plays a familiar instrument, with total integration, where the boundary between the person and the machine became difficult to find. When the hydraulic pressure began dropping unexpectedly at 600 miles from Honolulu, Sarah adjusted without comment, changing her control inputs in ways that compensated for the loss before the aircraft's systems had fully registered it. When a second electrical warning appeared at 400 miles, she talked Amanda through a manual bypass procedure that most commercial pilots would never learn and that Sarah had performed under combat conditions 3 years earlier on an aircraft that was far less cooperative than this one. When turbulence hit at 200 miles from Honolulu and the aircraft's yaw dampener began fighting against the manual control inputs, Sarah let the aircraft move and then brought it back with inputs so precise they barely showed on the instruments. In their F-22s on either side of the Boeing 787, Major Cole and Captain Torres coordinated everything. Weather updates from Honolulu. Emergency vehicle positioning at the airport. Direct communication with the control tower. Updates on Captain Reyes's condition from Dr. Okafor. Updates on runway availability. Landing sequence clearance. They flew escort the way good wingmen always fly, taking everything away from the lead pilot except the single job that only the lead pilot could do. On their private frequency, they had a conversation that both of them would remember for the rest of their lives. "You were at Nellis when she disappeared," Torres said. "You knew her. We trained together for about 8 months before she left on whatever that mission was, Cole replied. She was the most gifted pilot I had ever seen. I used to watch her fly and think it was not fair that one person could be that good. He paused. The way she is flying that 787 right now. That is her. Nobody flies like Ghost. Do you think she has really been alive this whole time? I think, Cole said carefully, that some of the things I heard about Operation Dark Passage over the years make a lot more sense right now than they did before tonight. They flew in silence for a moment, two F-22 pilots flanking a wounded airliner across the dark Pacific, escorts for a ghost who had come back to life to save 287 strangers. Honolulu is 30 minutes, Torres said finally. Is she going to get it down? Cole watched the 787 ahead, watched its movements, read its behavior the way a pilot reads another pilot's aircraft. He thought about the woman inside it. 5 years in the dark, 5 years of surviving things that would have ended other people, 5 years of being a ghost in ways that went beyond a call sign, and she had come back to save people she had never met, blown her own cover, ended 5 years of deep cover intelligence work, because a plane full of strangers needed a pilot. Yeah, he said. She is going to get it down. United 4471, Honolulu approach, a new voice entered the radio. You are cleared for immediate approach, runway 8 right. All traffic cleared. Emergency equipment is in position. Winds are 0-80 at 12, gusting to 18. Runway is 12,000 feet. Full emergency response standing by. Good luck. Copy, Honolulu, Sarah replied. Thank you. She began the descent. This was the most difficult portion of the flight and Sarah knew it. The Boeing 787's remaining hydraulic systems were adequate but not generous. The partial electrical failure had been contained but not resolved. The aircraft wanted to drift left at lower speeds, a tendency she had been managing for 90 minutes and that would demand absolute precision in the final approach. She had one attempt. One runway. One chance to stop 350,000 pounds of aluminum and fuel and people on 12,000 feet of concrete with braking systems she could not fully trust. She had landed on worse. Ghost, this is Havoc, Major Cole's voice came through the headset as the lights of Honolulu appeared ahead in the darkness. You have the airport visual at 11 o'clock. You are perfectly aligned. You have this. Bring them home. The word home landed somewhere inside Sarah in a place she had been keeping sealed for 5 years. She did not open it. Not yet. There was work to do first. She flew the approach with complete stillness. Not the stillness of someone suppressing emotion, but the stillness of someone who had found perfect alignment between what they were doing and what they were meant to do. Every input was exact. Every correction was anticipated before it was needed. Amanda Chen sat in the right seat running checklists and calling altitudes and felt that she was watching something that she would spend the rest of her career trying to understand and describe and teach. At 50 feet above the runway, Sarah said one word, stable. Main wheels touched with a contact so smooth that several passengers in the cabin who had been awake, who knew something serious was happening and had been praying in quiet languages for the last 30 minutes, did not initially realize they had landed. They thought they had imagined it. Then the thrust reversers engaged and the aircraft decelerated with steady authority, and the terminal building began moving past the windows, and outside in the darkness they could see the red and white lights of emergency vehicles moving alongside them, and they understood that they were alive. United 4471 on the ground, Sarah transmitted. All souls safe. Thank you for your help. Raptor flight copies, Major Cole responded, and his voice had that quality again, that barely controlled quality. Outstanding flying, Ghost. Welcome home. The two F-22 Raptors made a single low pass over the runway at 300 knots before climbing away into the Hawaiian sky, their navigation lights bright in the pre-dawn darkness, a salute to the pilot who had brought her aircraft home. Captain Reyes was taken directly to Queen's Medical Center where a surgical team worked for 4 hours to repair the damage a massive heart attack had done to his heart. He survived. His surgical team later said he had arrived at the hospital at precisely the right moment, 30 minutes later, and the outcome would have been very different. Passengers evacuated, processed, examined by medical personnel and given everything they needed. Amanda Chen gave a statement to airport authorities and aviation investigators that lasted 90 minutes and contained, by her own account, more superlatives than she had used in the previous 5 years of her life combined. She described Sarah's management of the electrical systems as something she had never seen and could not fully explain. She described the approach and landing as the finest single piece of flying she had ever witnessed. But Sarah was not there to hear it. By the time the investigators reached the aircraft and asked to speak with the assisting pilot, she was gone. She had moved through the crowd during the evacuation with the practiced invisibility of someone who had spent 5 years being invisible for a living, and she had disappeared into the darkness of Honolulu before anyone could stop her. She could not stay hidden for long, and she knew it. The cockpit voice recorder had captured everything. Every word she had said. Every instruction she had given. The name she had used. The call sign she had spoken. Within 3 hours, aviation investigators were listening to the recording with expressions that moved through skepticism and confusion into something approaching disbelief. Within 6 hours, intelligence analysts in Washington, D.C. were pulled from their beds to look at voice analysis results comparing the recording to archived samples of Captain Sarah Martinez speaking before Operation Dark Passage. The match was 99.3% certain. Within 12 hours, 2 F-22 pilots at Hickam Air Force Base were giving formal statements about a woman who had used a call sign that had been retired 5 years ago, who had flown a crippled Boeing 787 across 940 miles of open ocean with a skill level that neither pilot had ever encountered before, and who had identified herself as a pilot who the United States Air Force officially listed as killed in action during a classified operation. Within 24 hours, the intelligence community had pulled every file connected to Operation Dark Passage and found something that caused the duty officer who discovered it to sit for 3 full minutes without moving or speaking. Operation Dark Passage had not ended 5 years ago. It had continued, without official support, without a budget line, without any government authorization whatsoever, as one woman's private decision to keep doing the job she had been trained to do. The intelligence that had flowed through deep cover channels from an asset identified only as Sparrow over the previous 5 years, intelligence that had saved American infrastructure, identified hostile agents, and changed the strategic calculus in the Pacific Theater, all of it traced back to Captain Sarah Martinez. She had not gone dark. She had gone deeper. 2 days after the landing, Sarah walked up the front path of a house in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at 6 o'clock in the evening and knocked on the door. Her father opened it. Diego Martinez was 64 years old, his black hair gone to gray and his face carrying more lines than it had when she had seen him last. He looked at the woman standing on his porch and went absolutely still. His hand gripped the door frame. His mouth opened and no sound came out for a long moment that seemed to contain 5 years of grief and absence and the slow gray weight of missing someone every single day. "Hi, Dad," Sarah said. He pulled her into his arms with a strength that did not match his age and held her there on the porch without saying anything for a very long time. Behind him, her mother appeared in the kitchen doorway and made a sound that Sarah would carry in her heart for the rest of her life. And then her brother Marco was there too, in his Air Force uniform with his captain's bars on his collar, and they were all holding each other on the porch in the New Mexico evening while the neighbors' porch lights came on one by one and the stars appeared above Albuquerque in a sky that had not changed while everything beneath it had. Later, when they sat at the kitchen table where Sarah had done homework as a child, her father told her that he had figured out she was alive roughly 2 years earlier. The intelligence reports coming through certain channels carried patterns that reminded him of the way his daughter thought. He had never said anything to anyone because he could not prove it and because he understood the cost of breaking her cover. He had just lit an extra candle in the window every night and waited. Her mother said nothing about the 5 years. She just kept touching Sarah's face. 3 days after the family reunion, military officials arrived at the house in Albuquerque, respectful and careful and absolutely insistent. General Michelle Park, Pacific Air Forces, led the team personally. Captain Martinez, General Park said, sitting across from Sarah at the kitchen table with a cup of her mother's coffee. You have been operating completely unsupported for 5 years in the most sensitive intelligence environment in the world. The work you produced is extraordinary. But there are procedures. There are questions. There are a great many very senior people who need to understand what happened and what comes next. Sarah looked at her family. Then at the general. I am not disappearing again, she said. My family just got me back. General Park nodded. Those days are over. I give you my personal word. But we need a full debrief and we need it now. There are things you know that this government needs to understand. And frankly, there are things this government owes you that we need to begin making right. The debrief lasted 4 weeks at a secure facility in Virginia. Sarah sat across from intelligence analysts and military strategists and psychological specialists and described 5 years that the official record would not fully acknowledge for another decade. She described moving through North Korea and China and Russia in a series of cover identities so complete that even people who had known her for months did not suspect she was anything other than who she claimed to be. She described 4 cyber attacks she had identified and disrupted. She described the weapons technology transfers she had photographed. She described the 2 hostile agents she had identified inside American defense contractors, both of whom were subsequently arrested on charges that were never publicly connected to her work. The intelligence specialists told her, at the end of the 4th week, that the work she had produced during 5 years of unauthorized deep cover operations had, by conservative estimate, prevented economic damage totaling in the hundreds of billions of dollars and had likely saved between several hundred and several thousand lives from the attacks she had disrupted. They said this in the quiet, careful way that intelligence professionals say things that are too large to say out loud, and Sarah listened and did not say anything because there was nothing to say. She had not done it for the numbers. She had done it because it was the job and because she was the person who could do it and because when you are the person who can do something and the something desperately needs doing, you do it. The story broke in the press on the 7th day after the landing. A journalist had connected the name Sarah Martinez from aviation reports about Flight 4471 with the classified Air Force file and found enough in the public record to build the outline of something extraordinary. The story spread from aviation circles to mainstream news within 48 hours. Within a week, it was everywhere. The headlines were predictable. Pilot declared dead, returns to save airliner. Ghost pilot lives. 5 years behind enemy lines and she still brought them home. The 287 passengers of Flight 4471 were interviewed by every news organization in the world. They described a calm woman who had appeared in their darkest moment and talked them down from terror with the specific authority of someone who had managed far worse. They said she had never seemed frightened. Several of them said independently that when she came on the cabin announcement and explained what she was doing and what was going to happen, they had believed her without question, because her voice carried a quality that made doubt impossible. I knew we were going to be okay, said passenger Robert Yamamoto, a retired engineer from Seattle who had been sitting 4 rows behind Sarah when the emergency began. I did not know why I knew. I just knew. Then I found out who she was and I understood. She was someone who had survived everything for 5 years and come back through the door to save us. Of course she sounded like everything was going to be okay. She had already survived the alternative. First Officer Amanda Chen gave interviews for 3 weeks. She said the same thing in every one of them, in different words, and the thing she always came back to was this: Captain Martinez did not just save the aircraft. She saved me. I was alone and I was losing and she walked in and she was exactly who we needed her to be. I have been flying for 12 years. I will spend the rest of my career trying to become half the pilot she is. Major Kevin Cole, call sign Havoc, gave one interview, authorized by Air Force Public Affairs, that received 17 million views in its first week. He spoke about the moment he heard the call sign Ghost on his radio above the North Pacific. When I heard that call sign, he said, I literally could not move for a moment. My hands stopped. My brain stopped. Because I knew that call sign. I had touched her helmet in its case for 2 years. I had stood at her memorial. And then I listened to her flying that aircraft and I knew it was her, because nobody flies like Ghost. Nobody has ever flown like Ghost. Whatever she was doing for 5 years out there, it made her even better than she already was. Which I would have told you before tonight was not possible. 2 months after the landing, the Department of Defense held a ceremony that Sarah tried 4 separate times to have cancelled or reduced or moved to somewhere private. She lost all 4 arguments with General Park. The ceremony was at the Pentagon, in the courtyard, on a Tuesday morning with a sky so blue over Washington, D.C. that it looked manufactured. Her family was there. Her old squadron had flown from Nellis. Major Cole and Captain Torres had flown in from Hickam. Amanda Chen was there. Dr. Okafor was there. Representatives of the 287 passengers were there. General Park presented Sarah with the Distinguished Intelligence Medal for 5 years of unauthorized but undeniably extraordinary intelligence work that had produced results no authorized operation could have matched. She also presented the Distinguished Flying Cross for the landing of Flight 4471. She presented 3 other commendations that Sarah later could not have named because she was not fully present for the ceremony. She was looking at her father's face in the crowd and thinking about kitchen tables and candles in windows and the long and winding road home. The moment that she would remember longest came after the formal ceremony ended. Her old squadron, 14 pilots who had known her before and a dozen more who had only known her by reputation, gathered around her on the Pentagon lawn. Major Cole, leading them, presented her with a new flight helmet. It was dark gray, the color of an F-22 in overcast sky. On both sides, painted in careful white letters, was the word Ghost. We have been holding this for you since the first rumor started, Cole said, and his voice only went slightly irregular at one point. Your call sign was retired when we lost you. We are reinstating it today. You are the only person who will ever carry it. And whenever you decide you are ready to fly with us again, your place in the formation is waiting. Sarah took the helmet and looked at her own call sign and felt something she had not permitted herself to feel in 5 years, something that had no clean name, that was made up of grief and relief and belonging and homecoming and the specific joy of being known. She felt her throat close for a moment. Then she straightened and looked at the pilots around her, her people, the community that was home in ways that went beyond geography or blood. Thank you, she said. And yes. I am ready to fly. 6 weeks later, Sarah Martinez climbed into an F-22 Raptor at Nellis Air Force Base for the first time in 5 years and 4 months. The aircraft smelled the same as it always had, that specific combination of hydraulic fluid and electronics and metal that she had never been able to fully forget during any of the years she had spent on the ground. She ran through the pre-flight checks and her hands remembered every switch and panel without being told. Her body remembered the seat, the controls, the way the aircraft sat on the runway with that specific quality of barely contained energy. Major Cole was in the second F-22 beside her on the runway, her wingman as he had been her wingman 2 nights ago over the Pacific, as he had been her wingman in training years ago before everything changed. Ghost, he said through the radio. You ready? Born ready, Havoc, she said, and pushed the throttles forward. The twin engines lit behind her and pressed her back into the seat and the runway began moving and then the runway was gone and she was airborne above the Nevada desert in an F-22 Raptor climbing at a rate that no commercial aircraft in the world could match, climbing into air that she had missed every day for 5 years in ways she had not let herself fully feel until right now, climbing through thin cold air into a sky that was enormous and blue and completely, absolutely free. Ghost, you still have it, Cole said, watching her climb. I never lost it, she replied, and she pulled the nose up and went vertical in a maneuver that left contrails spiraling in the desert air below her like a signature, like a message left in the sky, like a woman saying here I am, I came back, I was always here. 3 years have passed since United Airlines Flight 4471 landed safely in Honolulu. Captain Sarah Martinez now runs a classified training program at Nellis Air Force Base that draws students from every branch of military service and multiple allied nations. She teaches pilots to fly in the most demanding conditions imaginable: damaged aircraft with failing systems, communication blackouts, hostile airspace, emergencies that no manual covers. She teaches the physical skills and the mental disciplines that 5 years in the field refined in her to a level that her students can see but struggle to describe. She teaches them to be calm when everything is screaming. She teaches them to find patterns in chaos. She teaches them to make impossible decisions and accept the consequences. But the lesson she always comes back to, the one she says is more important than any technical skill, is this: there will come a moment when the mission you planned and the reality in front of you are two completely different things. In that moment, you will have to decide what you are actually there to do. Are you there to follow the plan? Or are you there to serve the people who need you? I spent 5 years as a ghost, she tells every new class. I was invisible because the work required it and I accepted that. But when 287 people needed a pilot, I did not hesitate. Because the pilot was what I actually was, underneath everything else. Your title will change. Your mission will change. The aircraft will change. But who you fundamentally are, what you are actually there to do, that does not change. Know that about yourself before you ever get in the cockpit. Know it so well that no amount of chaos or pressure or time or distance can take it away from you. The 287 passengers of Flight 4471 have not forgotten the night they should have died over the Pacific Ocean. They formed an association they call the Pacific 287, and they meet once a year in Honolulu on the anniversary of the landing. Some have become aviation safety advocates. Some have written books. Several have become pilots themselves, inspired by what happened in the dark above the Pacific. All of them share the particular quality that people share when they have passed through a door they should not have passed through and come out alive on the other side, a quality of gratitude so specific and so deep that it changes the way they see every ordinary day. Captain David Reyes flies commercially again, carrying a different relationship with his own mortality than he had before September 8, 2025. Amanda Chen is now a captain herself, the youngest female captain in United Airlines history, and she keeps a photograph in her cockpit of Sarah standing beside an F-22 in the Nevada desert. Major Kevin Cole, call sign Havoc, commands the fighter squadron where Sarah once flew, and he stops at her memorial plaque every morning, the one that now carries an additional line below her name in smaller letters, declared killed in action 2020. Returned home 2025. Welcome back, Ghost. On September 8, 2027, the second anniversary of the landing, Sarah stands at the memorial wall at Nellis with her father on one side and Marco on the other and a group of her students arranged around her in the early morning Nevada light. She is looking at her own name on the wall, the name that was carved there 5 years ago when the people who loved her thought she was gone forever. They have not changed the plaque. She asked them not to. The record of sacrifice, the marking of cost, is part of the truth of what happened, and she thinks the truth should stay visible. A young pilot in her training program, one who was 17 years old when Sarah disappeared and is now 22 and learning to fly F-22s, asks her the question that everybody always asks eventually. Would you do it the same way again? If you were standing at that beach in North Korea with your aircraft burning and your choice in front of you, would you make the same decision? Sarah thinks about this for a long moment. She thinks about 5 years of cold and lonely and necessary work in hostile territory. She thinks about her mother's face when she came home. She thinks about 287 people who are alive today who would not be alive if she had stayed hidden. She thinks about the F-22 climbing vertical above the Nevada desert with contrails spiraling behind it, and the radio crackle of a call sign she had thought was gone forever being spoken by a pilot who remembered her. Yes, she says. I would do it exactly the same way. Not because it was not hard. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Not because it did not cost me. It cost me everything I thought I had. But because it mattered. Because the work mattered and the people I protected mattered and who I was doing it for mattered. And because in the end, it brought me back to this. She looks at the wall, at her name, at the plaque that says she died and came home. To my squadron. To my family. To the sky. You can survive a very long time as a ghost if you know who you actually are underneath the disappearing. And you can always find your way home if you never forget what home means. Above the memorial wall, as if on a signal from the universe, for F-22 Raptors from the 422nd appear from the north, flying low and fast over the base in the missing man formation, for aircraft in a diamond that should hold 5, the empty space in the formation marking absence and sacrifice and the price of service. But this year, for the first time since Sarah's return, the pilot who should have been standing here watching the formation from the ground is not watching from the ground. She is in the air. The lead F-22 in the formation pulls its nose up sharply and climbs straight toward the Nevada sky, and the other 3 hold the formation below it, and the aircraft rises until it is a glittering speck against the blue, and then it is gone, and the sound of its engines rolls back across the desert like thunder, like a declaration, like a homecoming. On the ground, Sarah's father watches the sky where the aircraft disappeared and puts his arm around his wife and says nothing at all, because there is nothing that needs to be said. His daughter is alive. His daughter came back. His daughter is up there in the sky where she has always belonged, doing what she was always built to do. The call sign Ghost flies again above Nellis Air Force Base on a blue September morning, and everyone who hears it knows they are hearing a legend. Not because the legend is about impossible skill or perfect missions or secret operations, though it contains all of those things. But because at its heart, the legend is about something simpler and harder and more important than any of those things. It is about a woman who disappeared into the dark for 5 years and came back through the door when people needed her, without hesitation, without calculation, without any consideration of personal cost. It is about a pilot who understood that the aircraft and the mission and the call sign were never the point. The people were always the point. The people you fly with. The people you fly for. The people who will never know your name but will wake up alive tomorrow because you made the right choice in the dark. Captain Sarah Martinez, call sign Ghost, stands at the memorial wall at Nellis Air Force Base on a September morning with her family beside her and her students around her and her squadron in the sky above her. She is home. She is alive. She was declared dead 5 years ago, and she never once stopped serving. Welcome home, Ghost. Welcome home.